Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to cover something quite special, something that caught my eye and warmed my heart. And that is a winning competitive 40k Eldar army utilizing not only Storm Guardians, one of my favorite battle line units in the Eldar Index, but also Dark Reapers, one of my favorite up-and-coming aspect warriors after the balanced status slate. And guys, this isn't a meme, this isn't a really experienced player using underperforming units to prove a point or just to quote-unquote have some fun. No, this is a list that was extremely well designed and performed to perfection against a lot of other very tough matchups. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of proven the efficacy of both Dark Reapers and Storm Guardians in competitive play. We've seen Storm Guardians in competitive play do pretty good at top tables, but they're, kind of a seldomly chosen unit. We've also seen spatterings here and there of Dark Reapers since the balanced status slate as well. But I truly think this is one of the first times we've seen Dark Reapers be so utilized and so effective in such a large tournament. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right in. So the first thing we're going to do today is take a look at the tournament itself. Most of the time it is important to look at the tournament to see how many players were in it, how competitive it was, etc. We're going to do a review and analysis of the winning Eldar list, and we're going to be talking about the secret to Dark Reapers and why they're about to see a lot more competitive play. All right, so let's take a look at the tournament itself. So this was, of course, the Alpine Cup singles located in Leoben, Austria. There were 170 players in attendance, and it was a very competitive event. There were a lot of players running very meta lists, and only the best of the best rose to the top. The event itself took place from April 4th to April 5th over the course of 2 days, and first place went to Liam Ricciardi, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and he was playing a very special Aeldari list, and of course, like I said at the beginning of this video, one that was truly close to my heart. So first of all, before we get into the video and the analysis of the list itself, I want to say congratulations to Liam for representing the Aeldari, but not only that, representing such an awesome list with some of my favorite units on it. And without further ado, let us go ahead and take a look at it. So of course, Liam's list was for the Alpine Cup singles, and it was for 2,000 points. For his characters, he had an Autarch Wayleaper, of course, with the Phoenix Gem, pretty much a staple in most competitive Eldar builds. Very tanky, as the Phoenix Gem can revive the Autarch if needed, also has Lone Operative, and is a pretty good combatant as well. Making an appearance once again is Fuegan. Everybody loves him in competitive play. He's essentially a Phoenix Gem, very cheap for what he does. He has a very strong anti-large weapon as well that also doubles as an anti-mech type weapon. He's also very good in combat, being able to dish out a lot of strength 5, AP-4 attacks with the Fire Axe. And of course, those are done at damage 3. So anything that doesn't have an invul save is going to pretty much be splatted instantly. A bit of a surprise in the list, but not really once you understand why Yvraine was put in this. Now, this isn't a Ynnari list. A lot of people see Yvraine as a tax, but she's actually quite good. She has a ton of devastating wounds against infantry, and the meta is slowly shifting in that direction. Space Marines, of course, are very strong. You have certain Dark Angels builds. Black Templars are, kind of in vogue right now as far as competitive play goes. And Yvraine, being able to do devastating wounds with anti-infantry 2+, she also does devastating wounds in combat, is a very strong combo. A great way to chew through things like Terminators or, Blade Guard veteran blocks, anything that's super tough with invul saves, she can pretty much handle easily. And she's only 100 points, she's not that expensive. She also gives some significant buffs to the units she joins, especially Harlequins, who will benefit from the D3 model's revived ability that she has, and the 5+ Feel No Pain. For his battle line, he picked up a unit of Storm Guardians as well. Now, I love Storm Guardians. I think they're a great unit. They trade pretty effectively against a number of models. They're surprisingly durable. They don't seem very durable on paper, but once you get them on the battlefield, they do survive typically longer than an opponent would think. And they also make objectives sticky. So once you have an objective under your control, it's going to take that much more for your opponent to be able to remove you from that objective, which is of course extremely powerful. They're also pretty good at screening, and they pack a decent punch for the cost. Again, you're not taking them for the special weapons, but they do have 2 flamers, 2 fusion guns, and 2 power swords, which means they can scrap with a number of units and provide support. And in some cases, take on smaller units all by themselves. Things like scouts or intercessors are, prime targets for Storm Guardians to kill. Believe it or not, 2 fusion guns being able to reroll a hit and reroll a wound will most likely result in the death of at least 2 intercessors. From there, the flamers and the pistols maybe take out another, you charge in, and you clean up the rest. The Storm Guardians are out trading the Marines in every sense of the word. So overall, a really versatile unit that has utility in almost every matchup that you play. As far as the dedicated transports that Leon brought with him, he brought a single Wave Serpent to the battle with a Bright Lance and a Shuriken Cannon. Of course, the Wave Serpent is to carry around your Vrain and her 11 Harlequin buddies. No surprises there, but the Wave Serpent's also a pretty good transport at, dealing mortal wounds. Again, you have the ability to tank shock. The unit inside, which is going to be Harlequins, has the grenade stratagem, which I talked about in a previous video when I covered Wave Serpents. And the Wave Serpent shield can do an additional D3 mortal wounds, which can mean the difference between a big target dying and staying alive. It's also a battle shock test, so if your opponent wants to pop smoke but fails that battle shock, they're most likely going to be quickly dead. As for the rest of the list, we have triple Dark Reapers with Tempest Launchers. The Tempest Launcher, of course, is a fantastic indirect fire weapon. It's the cheapest source of indirect fire in the index, and it is a really good one at clearing out light infantry or putting wounds on heavy infantry. Also, while it itself doesn't have Ignore Cover, it does have AP-1, which means that your opponents are at least not going to be able to get a better save off of you if they are lighter infantry. The Reaper launchers of the Dark Reapers are pretty good as well. Strength 8, AP-2, damage 2 on their star shots, which means that with each 5+ that is failed from a Marine, that's going to be a dead model. The Reaper launcher does need direct line of sight, but because it has a variable shooting profile, there's rarely a target out there that it's not going to be able to do something against, even if you're wounding on 5s against tougher vehicles. And of course, if you can draw line of sight to light infantry, it's really good against things like Sisters of Battle with strength 5, AP-1, and damage 1, meaning that, essentially for each failed 4+, that is going to be a dead battle sister. And I really do think the best part about this setup in general is that it just, again, puts a lot of pressure on your opponent from turn 1. The Tempest Launcher has a 36-inch range. It's one of the longer range indirect fire options in our index. And it's not necessarily something your opponent can afford to ignore, but Dark Reapers are usually placed in the rear of the battlefield and harder to get to, especially if you have a lot of fast units that are screening out your opponent and making things difficult on that front. Speaking of, we do have a unit of 5 Rangers, which are a great screening unit. They're also great at scoring secondary objectives early, like deploy Teleport Homer, if you happen to draw that secondary. They're also able to kind of filter out any kind of scout moves your opponent might have or enemy infiltrators themselves. They don't, of course, do all that much damage themselves, but they're really more there for a sacrificial unit that can be used for objectives and also for, various screening purposes. Following that up, we have 2 units of Shadow Spectres. Shadow Spectres are, of course, a staple in competitive play after the balanced data slate. Being able to shoot and then move 6 inches back behind terrain is very strong. They're good at scoring secondary objectives, like I've outlined in a couple of my other videos. And they deal a ton of anti-infantry damage, being able to mow down things like guardsmen fairly easily with their blast profiles, or being able to take chunks out of light vehicles and heavy infantry with their focus shot. They do an absolutely immense amount of damage, and I think one of the main strengths of this list is that instead of leaning into things like Bright Lances and D cannons and stuff like that to provide the anti-large in the army, this list instead opts to go with volume of fire, and I have to say, after seeing this army in action, it can indeed take out the game's toughest targets. Things like Land Raiders and stuff like that are no match for the raw firepower that this list can dish out. And of course, what helps it deal with things like land raiders that, typically the rest of the list is going to be, pressed to actually handle correctly are the Skyweavers. So you have 2 units of Skyweavers here with the Skyweaver Haywire cannons. Haywire is really effective against large targets like land raiders. You can typically deal about 12 damage between 2 of these things, if not more. And that will put land raiders within range of, anything basically being able to kill it. Shadow Specters, Shroud Runners, even Swooping Hawks can force enough lethal hits on a land raider to bring it down at that point. Skyweavers are also a great utility unit. They have a large base size, so can very easily screen enemies out. They can tie enemies up in combat because of the 4+ invul save that they have. They might actually survive. They do have toughness 4 and 3 wounds apiece as well. And lastly, but most importantly, they are very fast. So they can basically get any angle they want to pop a key target. And then once that key target is down, the enemy's mobility is crippled, whatever it is. This really fast and effective army can then surround it and prevent it from doing its thing. We also have 3 units of Swooping Hawks in this list because, of course, Swooping Hawks are one of the best secondary objective scoring units in the game, but they can also lay down some serious firepower via lethal hits. So while a single unit of 5 may not be that effective at maybe taking out 5 Marines or taking out the last dregs of a Land Raider or, an Cursor, whatever it is, 3 units of these guys can pump out a serious amount of shots. And when combined, you'd be surprised. 3 units of these guys on average can probably deal about 3 wounds to something like a Dreadnought, which is usually enough to finish it off. And of course, these guys are also great screening tools. They can screen the backfield for you for the first couple turns of the game. They can then, of course, transition right into scoring secondaries later in the battle. So, Swooping Hawks, a great objective unit and utility unit that can also dish out some damage when needed. Escorting your Vrain, we also have a massive unit of Quins in the Wave Serpent. They're going to be packing 4 fusion pistols and 10 Harlequin special weapons. These guys are extremely tough to deal with, especially with your Vrain having a 4+ invul save, the ability to pop -1 to hit, and also the fact that they're reviving models per turn. They're actually a really powerful and difficult unit to deal with. Even against the toughest combat units in the game, this unit can grind those enemies down to a standstill, lock them in combat for several turns, while the rest of the army runs circles around their prey. Finishing off the list, we have 3 units of 5 Warp Spiders, and of course, if you're going the Volume of Fire route, you do need these guys because they deal devastating wounds, so you can basically guarantee that each unit is going to deal about 3 devastating wounds to an enemy. Which, while by itself it doesn't seem like a lot, if you factor in that you have 3 units of these, and they're also doing other stuff like screening opponents out and scoring secondaries, you have 3 units that are doing a lot of work for you. And actually, in one of Liam's games against Black Templars, 1 unit of Warp Spiders single-handedly blocked up over probably 800 points worth of models on the opponent's side, including a Land Raider Redeemer, which prevented the opponent from overwatching Liam's other units later that turn. It was really quite the example of effective screening at its best. And if anybody's interested in how that game went, you should check out War Games Live. They basically live streamed the event, and one of the games in which Liam was playing in against Black Templars was streamed in its entirety. So if any of you out there are looking for a masterclass in screening with Aeldari, definitely check out that game. Okay, so what were my final thoughts on the list? So obviously this list is focused on incredible speed and hard-hitting units. It basically takes all of the best and most hard-hitting aspect warriors and puts them in the same list together. It exerts extreme amounts of pressure on opponents with multiple fast-moving aspects and indirect fire. You have your Dark Reapers with their Tempest Launchers. You have Warp Spiders, Swooping Hawks, Shadow Specters. And of course, bringing the whole list together, we have Storm Guardians making objectives sticky and making it harder for your opponent to actually take those objectives back, and allowing your aspect warriors to take a more proactive role in the battle itself. It also, of course, has great move blocking and scoring potential with the Swooping Hawks and Warp Spiders you have. Just an absolute massive number of potential scoring units on the battlefield. And lastly, you have a huge Sledgehammer unit of Quins with Yvrain, which is effective at tying up and neutering big threats. Which is a key aspect to the list, because even though, you don't have any Wraith Blades or Avatar of Cain, you have a unit that can essentially take out your opponent's biggest threat, something that can kill multiple units of Aspect Warriors a turn. You tie that unit up, you make it impossible for that unit to move around the battlefield effectively, and you essentially seal the last nail in the enemy's coffin. Okay, so now kind of moving past the list a little bit and looking at the bigger picture, let's talk about the secret to Dark Reapers and why we're about to see a lot more of them in competitive play. So Dark Reapers are now one of the few units in the Eldar Index. Used to be Night Spinners, but now it's Dark Reapers that can exert immediate pressure on enemy units in the back lines with their indirect fire. And because they quickly clear chaff, putting a cheap unit on a back objective is just not going to be enough against this type of army. For example, if your opponent decides to put a unit of cultists on the rear objective instead of a more durable unit of Chaos Space Marines, they're going to be in a load of hurt because that unit of cultists is going to die very quickly on that objective, and you're going to be able to, with Fire and Fade and the immense speed that your army has, be able to move a unit of Warp Spiders or Swooping Hawks onto that objective to capture it, putting your opponent in a really awkward position. They're also great anti-mech units. They do great damage against mech targets, marine equivalents, and we're seeing more and more of those in the current meta. Especially with the more popular Space Marine armies, things like Dark Angels with army-wide stealth and cover. We're seeing a lot of that with Black Templars having an army-wide 6-up feel no pain. So we're going to need more ways to deal with those types of units. And guys, I'm sorry to say this, Bright Lances are not going to be our answer. Fire Dragons are still very good against mech targets as well, but you can't have an infinite number of Fire Dragons in your army, and typically once they shoot, they're going to die the next turn. So you do have to think about that. I love Fire Dragons, don't get me wrong, but we are going to be, I think, seeing more Dark Reapers in the meta because of their ability to deal with Marines at a longer range more effectively. And on top of that, being able to ignore cover and hit modifiers means they do decent chip damage against units that pop smoke or similar defensive strat. And like I said before, Dark Angels having basically army-wide auras of cover and -1 to hit, guess what? Dark Reapers don't really care about that, right? You can shoot a unit of Dark Reapers into a land speeder with stealth and cover, and they do not care. That land speeder is still going to be having to save on a 5+, and the Dark Reapers are still going to hit it on a 3+. And yes, while one unit of Dark Reapers might not be enough to kill a land speeder like that in a Dark Angels list, you better believe that 2 units will be able to bring it down. And once you start bringing those land speeders down, those support units down, then the rest of the army will become much more fragile. Alrighty, so in conclusion, Aeldari are still looking very strong in competitive play, especially among excellent players willing to reach deeper into the index. I've sadly heard quite a few players at this point say that, that the Eldar aren't that good in competitive play anymore and they're more of a mid-tier faction now and stuff like that. And while I do agree that the numbers do place them solidly in the middle of the pack, I don't think for a second that the Eldar are out of the picture. In fact, I really do think that their lower win rate is just attributed to the fact that if you make one mistake with them as a faction, you will probably lose that game. They are an army that is basically on the razor's edge of winning and losing a game at any moment. And, in the hands of a skilled player, they can do extremely well and they can do some extraordinary things. And between you and me, I actually think that we're going to see the Eldar rise in win rate a little bit over the next couple months as some of the new codexes come out, and of course, as the nerfs hit the Necrons and the Custodies in the upcoming balanced data slate. Which is coming soon, guys, so look forward to some Necron and Custodes adjustments, and perhaps minor adjustments to some other factions as well. One of the factions that, comes to mind is actually Sisters of Battle. Sisters of Battle often have been kind of treated as an underdog this edition, but they've actually had some really good abilities and really good army compositions. They've just been stifled by the highly competitive and, quite frankly, overpowered Eldar in the first little bit of the edition. Like most underperforming factions in the beginning of the edition, I think Eldar really did push a lot of those factions down even further. So, again, look forward to some of those adjustments and look forward to the Eldar looking as strong as ever. I don't think we'll probably see any more nerfs, but, cross my fingers, knock on wood, we'll see. And kind of going back to the list for just a second, I was really excited to see Dark Reapers hit the table. Not only just one unit of Dark Reapers, but all 3 of them. And it was really awesome to see, and it absolutely warmed my heart. And I think as a community, we need to be more willing to experiment and think outside the box to continue to stay on top and continue to win games in competitive play. Or even just at a local game store, having the courage to try something new in a game, to try to make it work. These are the hallmarks of champions. All right, everybody, that is going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. And again, congratulations to Liam's list and Liam for winning this tournament. You're awesome, dude. And thank you for repping Dark Reapers in a big way. I also want to thank, of course, all my patrons and supporters who have supported the channel over the last year and a half. Your help has greatly improved the channel and helped it grow significantly. If you also want to help the channel yourself and join the channel's Patreon, I have free trials activated, which will grant you permanent access to our Discord community, which is a community of Eldar players and enthusiasts who love talking about strategies, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description below. I'm also an Amazon affiliate and have a channel store page, so if you want to grab some discounted Eldar miniatures on Amazon or some Eldar-inspired apparel to rep your local game store, I will leave those links in the description as well. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.